The Haason Reddick situation escalates. The star pass rusher asks for a trade. It's officially time to worry. Let's break it all down today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, August 13th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, after a good weekend where the Jets had a very positive preseason opener against the Washington Commanders, and there were some good feelings around the team, things went bad on Monday, as Haason Reddick, the star pass rusher who's holding out, has asked for a trade, which is interesting. And it's the first situation like this I can remember because, as you probably know, Haason Reddick's been a member of the New York Jets for less than 5 months. He has yet to officially practice with the team. And I can't remember a comparable situation where a team trades for a player and before he even hits the practice field, he wants out. He wants to go to a new team. So that's going to be our discussion today. I had another great show planned where we're going to talk about some of the lessons from the Jets' first preseason game, but that's all out the window now because one of the highest profile players on the team has wanted to trade. And if you have not been following the situation, Haason Reddick sat out of the offseason program after the trade because he wanted a new contract. Now he's holding out of training camp. He's been fined over $1 million. We are closing in on $2 million worth of fines for Haason Reddick. The holdout, there's no end in sight. The first couple of days of training camp, there were reports the Jets and Reddick were making progress, but that seems to be out the window now as Reddick now wants out, and which at least the question was he ever in. The Jets released a statement. So this was, I think Reddick's representation leaked this to multiple reporters because around the same time yesterday afternoon, all these national reporters and local reporters came out around the same time and said that Reddick wanted to trade. The Jets then released their own statement from Joe Douglas on, with the team logo at the top, an official press release that said, "We have informed Haason that we will not trade him, that he is expected to be here with his teammates, and that he will continue to be fined per the collective bargaining agreement if he does not report. Since trade discussions back in March, we have been clear, direct, and consistent with our position. Our focus will remain on the guys we have here as we prepare for the regular season." So the translation I take from this is that this situation is a mess, and the situation is not even close to being resolved. And through this saga, you can go back to May. I remember I was actually out in San Diego at that point when this first broke. And I remember I said that I wasn't worried about it. And even at the start of training camp, I told you I wasn't super concerned. I wasn't super worried. I think I'm to the point where I'm worried now. And the reason I wasn't worried is that, 95 times out of 100 in situations like this, people respond to the incentives that are put in front of them. And for Reddick, the incentive has always been to go out and play well this year. And even if the Jets don't give him a new contract, if he wants a new deal, he's in the last year of his current deal. He's going to be a free agent after the season. He's got every incentive to go out and play well. 95 times out of 100, maybe 98, maybe 99. It happens more often than not. As much as we make situations out to be dramatic and unpredictable, most things in the NFL are predictable. I'm now concerned because it feels like Reddick's not responding to the incentives in front of him. And it feels like this has become a point of pride. And, and I understand I'm kind of interpreting things here, and maybe I'm taking too much poetic license with some of this stuff, but it really feels like Reddick values a new contract above anything else. And, look, there are certain situations, and, Jets were on the other side of one of these a few years back with Le'Veon Bell, where Le'Veon Bell ended up sitting out a whole season with the Pittsburgh Steelers because the Steelers did not agree to his terms, the terms that he wanted for a contract. And the Jets ended up signing Bell when he became a free agent. If I'm asked, I still feel like Reddick's going to be here at some point this year. It could even be week 1 because Reddick, if he extends this holdout through halfway through the season, I think it's like week 8, week 9, the Jets actually keep him under contract next year. So that prevents him from getting to free agency. So if Reddick wants to be a free agent after the season, and the Jets refuse to budge, then, he's got to report at some point. But this has clearly reached a very negative place. And I don't really understand how it got here. And I know that a lot of the audience is going to want me to bash Reddick, saying, he's not upholding his commitments. He promised the Jets he'd be here. I can't do that though, for a couple of reasons. One is we don't know that actually happened. That's the Jets story, is that they Reddick agreed to play under this current contract. That's the story the Jets are putting out there. And as I've said many times on this show through the years, when the Jets are in some controversial situation, you can be guaranteed that they will leak some information that paints them in a very flattering light to a beat reporter within an hour. And that certainly happened yesterday. But I just don't get how we got to this point from the standpoint that everybody in the league knew that Reddick wanted a new contract. The Eagles didn't trade one of the best pass rushers in the NFL for no reason. There was a reason. He wanted a new contract more than the Eagles were willing to pay. There are reports out there that other teams called the Philadelphia Eagles and said they asked to speak with Reddick's agents. And when Reddick's agents talked about his contract demands, the other teams lost interest. So now you're telling me the New York Jets, 31 other teams, couldn't figure out a way to make Reddick happy contractually. Well, 31 other teams realized that Haason Reddick wanted a new contract. Just the New York Jets, the only team out there in the entire league that Haason Reddick was willing to play under his current contract for, was the New York Jets. And then suddenly he changed his mind. I mean, that's kind of tough for me to believe. And Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk yesterday had an article out that I think really sums the situation up well. And Florio notes that, hey, even if this happened, even if Reddick said to the Jets, I'm happy with my current deal, the Jets should have read the room. The Jets should have realized the situation, because it was pretty obvious this dude wanted a new deal. It was pretty obvious that this thing, even if he said at the time, there was nothing binding about that. And look, you can get on Reddick if you want. I guess you could say, if you want to believe the Jets side of the story, you could say the guy should honor his contract. That doesn't do you any good, though. It doesn't do the Jets any good. If you go to a used car dealership and the used car dealer promises you all these great deals, and he doesn't deliver on them, I'm not blaming I'm blaming you for falling for a bad deal. Haason Reddick's a guy who's been on the Jets are his fourth team. He hasn't been in the NFL that long. This is not a guy with any loyalty to the Jets. It's not a guy with any history with the franchise. It was just clear that this was going to change really quickly. Even if he said he was fine with the deal at the time of the trade, there's a reason that no other team made this deal. There's a reason everybody else in the league knew Reddick wanted a new contract. It was obvious this dude wanted a new contract. And the Jets are acting like it's a shock that he wanted a new contract. There was nothing binding about that. And as Mike Florio noted in his article, that, after the deal's done, our favorite word will come up. A lot of the leverage goes to Reddick because the Jets gave up a third-round pick to get him. So I think that the Jets have put themselves in a bad situation. It feels to me like the Jets are trying to win the PR war more than they're trying to figure things out. Because the Jets put out this statement yesterday, and they leaked to the media that, Reddick's going back on his word. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't do you a whole lot of good. Yeah, fine. If you want to win the PR war, go ahead, do all this stuff. You should be trying to win games. And Haason Reddick helps you win games, and him not being on the field is not going to help you win games. Putting out some statement that we're going to be tough, that doesn't win you games. Leaking to the media this information about Reddick, yeah, maybe it gains you some sympathy in the fan base. It doesn't win you games. The focus should be on fixing the situation. Jets have put themselves in a really tough spot here, and I'm not sure there's a clear way out. But as we continue here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets, we're going to continue to talk about the Haason Reddick situation. We'll talk more about how the Jets got here, and we'll talk more about, is there a way out of this mess? Because the Jets certainly could use Haason Reddick on the field. That's as we continue here this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Today, unfortunately, we have to talk about Haason Reddick drama. The star defensive end wants out. I mean, you can debate whether he was ever really in because he hasn't appeared in a Jets uniform yet. But less than 5 months after the Jets acquired him from the Philadelphia Eagles, he has requested a trade from the New York Jets. And, I can't help but think about the situation that it's almost like the Jets are like you or I shopping online for something, and you find a deal that's like too good to be true. You can't believe the price you got it for. We got this star pass rusher, one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, and we only had to give up a third-round pick. That's just too good to be true. Of course, as with most things online, as with most of these sales that you see, if something seems too good to be true, it is. And the Jets gave up a third-round pick for Reddick, one of the top pass rushers in the NFL. Now, one thing I noted at the time was that he only has 1 year left on his contract, so a third-round pick for a 1 year rental is pretty expensive. Well, as we found out, it wasn't going to fly anyway. Again, how can we get this guy for $14 million? Well, you're not getting it for $14 million. He wants a bigger contract. And again, no matter what was said, nothing was binding. And Reddick, again, is a guy with no loyalty to the Jets. So to sit there and act like you were shocked now that you can't believe this is happening, I have a tough time having a lot of sympathy for the Jets from their point of view on this. Now, the Jets leaked a lot of information to Connor Hughes of SNY yesterday. And I mean, I think anything you said, this came out immediately. So I think we know that this is the Jets side of the story. And Hughes put out on Twitter that the Jets were informed by Haason Reddick's representation that he would report and play under his current contract. That obviously has not happened. They let Reddick know that they were opening to adjusting his current deal, converting non-guaranteed money to guaranteed money, but only when he showed up. They would not commit to him until he committed to them. The Jets will not cater to a player who has never played it down for them before. Understandable, considering the message that would send to others in the locker room who also want a new deal, such as DJ Reed, Michael Carter, etc. If Reddick wants to sit out the entire season, he can, but will be fined every day and games missed, and his contract will toll, and the Jets will retain his rights for next year. So, there's a lot there. The first thing that sticks out to me is that the Jets talked about being open to renegotiating his deal, which shows that they understood that he was not happy with his current contract. So, I think that the Jets sitting here again being shocked by this, it's tough for me to completely buy into. Another aspect of this is, the line, they would not commit to him until he committed to them. So that's a tacit admission that they weren't sure he was all in. So the Jets here on one hand, they're trying to sell you that, we knew Reddick would report, we knew he'd be fine. But we weren't going to do anything until he reported. It's like we need to see you commit to us before we commit to you. Okay, well, that means that you're not convinced this guy's all in. So, the Jets are, on the one hand, they're saying this guy guaranteed us he'd be here. On the other hand, we didn't completely believe it because we needed to wait and see. I don't understand, in many senses, I don't understand why you'd trade for a guy like this, a guy in the last year of his contract, why you'd give up a day 2 pick, even if it's 2 years down the line, if you weren't willing to give him a new contract. And that's just how things are done in the NFL. I've never seen, you can look at this any number of ways, but my question is, when's there ever been a situation like this in the NFL where a team trades for a guy and then the contract's not settled and the guy is a holdout immediately? And why is it the Jets are always in these weird, unprecedented situations? I just have a tough time, really buying into the Jets side of this story. And I mean, here's the other thing. I read you the entire tweet that Connor Hughes put out, but this is the real money line right here for me. The Jets will not cater to a player who has never played it down for them before. Understandable, considering the message that would send to others in the locker room who also want a new deal. So the Jets will never cater to a player who has never played it down for them before. I mean, how can the Jets, and this is, whatever he's tweeting out is coming straight from the Jets. I don't know how anybody with the Jets organization can make that statement with a straight face. I mean, did the year 2023 never happen? The Jets will never, on principle, cater to a player who's never played it down for them before. I mean, did we miss everything that happened last offseason? Why was Randall Cobb a member of this team last offseason? Why was Alan Lazard signed? Why is Nathaniel Hackett still the offensive coordinator? The Jets don't cater to, all the guys the Jets brought in from Green Bay last year. Now, you can argue it's different when it's a franchise quarterback, and that's fine. And look, there are moments where it does make sense to, especially for a very important player, to cater to him before, even if he hasn't played a snap for you. That's a different discussion. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong that the Jets did it, But for the Jets to sit there and say, we on principle, we will never cater to a player who hasn't taken the field for us. That's just a ludicrous statement because they've done it. They did it last year. Everybody saw you do it last year. Maybe that's factoring into what Reddick's doing right now. The fact he saw you do this last year. So the idea that we're drawing the line in the sand because we don't want to send the message that will cater to guys who've never been here before. You just did that last year. How can you possibly, with a straight face, tell me that you don't cater to guys who have never played here before on principle? That principle was thrown out the window last year. Again, maybe rightly so. You can argue there are players it's worth it for. You could argue it's worth it for Aaron Rodgers and not for Haason Reddick. That's fine. That's a different discussion. But you can't sit there and say, we will never do this because you've already done it. And again, when I think about how much slack do I give the Jets here? And do I believe their side of the story? The Jets are not very reliable narrators when it comes to these controversial situations. They have not been in the past. And when they go out and make a statement like that, it really makes me question how accurately they're portraying the situation. But the most charitable interpretation, again, that I can come up with for the New York Jets in this situation is that Reddick's representation they're telling the truth, and Reddick's representation actually did tell them, we're going to play for you, and backed out away from that. But even that, I just still don't think the Jets look great because, again, this is a guy who clearly wanted a new contract. He had nothing in writing. That contract was not even if they agreed to it, that's not binding. And here's the other aspect of this. And I know this is something a lot of people aren't going to want to hear. The Jets jettisoned two guys who developed in this organization this offseason who play the same position, John Franklin Myers and Bryce Huff. They wanted nothing further to do with these guys. They threw them out here because they were chasing the next shiny object, Haason Reddick. Sometimes it's better to keep the guys who have loyalty to your organization. Sometimes it's better to keep the guys who grew up in your locker room and have something invested in your team. Haason Reddick, again, this is his fourth team. This is a guy who's wanted a payday his whole career and hasn't gotten one. And he has no loyalty to the Jets. This is a guy who almost won the Super Bowl in Philadelphia and said, I'm out of here. I don't want to be here anymore if you're not going to pay me. It's clear that Reddick's motivation is money. And, if I was in his situation, maybe that would be the same for me. You chase these big names because you're chasing because you want the headlines, because you want to win the offseason. Well, sometimes it doesn't work out. And I still have hopes that things will work out here for Reddick. But I think it is worth saying the Jets threw out two guys who were pretty loyal to this organization, guys who played great for this team. And now they're trying to like generate sympathy because this guy, they bring in this hired gun, and this hired gun starts acting like a hired gun. Look, you want to get on Reddick, fine, but I'm not good. I don't think it's fair to act like the Jets are the victims here. I just don't, because if you look at this situation, I think that this has been mishandled. So you can get there and you can go out and say, fine, Reddick's in the wrong. If you want to say that, I don't have an issue with it. You want to say, stand strong, Jets. You want to say, we're not budging. If he wants to sit out, he can sit out. That's fine, but it doesn't fix the problem. The problem is the Jets need Haason Reddick on the field. So, you can act like a tough guy and say, we're not going to budge. Yeah, fine. Maybe that feels good, but that doesn't address the actual issue, which is that the Jets need to win games this year. And having Haason Reddick on the field makes that much easier. Jets need to figure this out, and there's no easy answer because, they can't just give Haason Reddick a blank check. But they also can't. They also need to get him on the field. And more press releases from Joe Douglas isn't going to do it. Jets have put themselves in a mess right here. They need to figure it out. Now, there is one player who could help the Jets maybe get out of this mess a little bit, and it's not Haason Reddick. It's a guy who's now going to be even more on the spotlight than he already was, and this is a player who's pretty high profile. Jets need Will McDonald to step up this year. They needed it anyway. Now with Haason Reddick's status questionable, they'll need it even more. How can Will McDonald develop? Let's talk about that continuing here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals who are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the tools for the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I don't know, maybe the Jets are going to need to head to LinkedIn to find a new defensive end. Well, you should know that LinkedIn is not just a jobs board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who are not actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. And on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified professional within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and may not have time or resources to hire. So LinkedIn is constantly finding new ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. It's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Tuesday. Haason Reddick has requested a trade from the New York Jets. It is a trade that it is a request that does not seem like the Jets will grant. The Jets released an official statement from Joe Douglas indicating that they will not trade Haason Reddick, that the team's current stance at the moment is that Reddick can either report or continue to be fined, but he will remain a member of the New York Jets for the foreseeable future. But if Reddick does not report, then Jets defensive line gets reshuffled. And suddenly what looked like a big strength at the defensive end position looks like far less of a strength, because Reddick was supposed to be the number one defensive end on the team. Jermaine Johnson's very solid. Of course, he went to the Pro Bowl last year, 7.5 sacks. And, it's not just the sacks. Sometimes we focus exclusively on the sacks with defensive ends, and rightly so. I mean, that's the most important thing defensive ends can do, is put the quarterback on the ground. But Jermaine Johnson's also an excellent run defender. But behind him, you have a lot of question marks. Will McDonald, the first round pick from a year ago, what do you have in him? It's one thing to have him as like your number 3 defensive end. And, it's still an important role, as I've said many times on this show. The way Robert Saleh rotates his defensive linemen in and out, try and keep them fresh, the third defensive end is essentially a starting level player. But it's different to have him behind McDonald and Reddick than having him as one of the top 2 guys. And, McDonald, the first preseason game against Washington, there were some ups and some downs. He had an excellent spin move where he delivered a hit on the quarterback. And, that's the type of thing that you could see at Iowa State. You saw like the makings of a good spin move, but he didn't have the timing down just right. And I remember like when the Jets drafted him, I watched some of him at Iowa State, and I said, what, the year of work, he'll figure out the timing, he'll figure out how to get on top of a guy and then make the spin, and that could be a lethal move for him. Well, through one preseason game, he's got a hit, and it came as part of that spin move. He also, I saw there was a speed rush on the outside where he kind of got stonewalled, but if we're talking about like how McDonald develops, that's a good combo. Essentially you want pass rushing moves that complement each other. And, I like the idea of McDonald being a speed rush spin move kind of guy, because look, he's not overly big. In fact, if his listed weight on the Jets official roster is 241 pounds, which puts him at like the very bottom when we're talking like size of defensive ends in the NFL. I mean the very, very bottom. 240 is about as low as it gets for defensive ends in the NFL. And that means McDonald's, he's not going to be a power guy. He's not going to be a guy who moves people around. He's probably not going to be a guy who's very strong at playing the run. And that's not necessarily a big deal for the Jets. The Jets clearly have a role at defensive ends that for a guy where they're just looking for pass rushing. There's always, I think one of the 2 defensive ends, they're always looking for just pass rushing. That was true when they had Carl Lawson. Carl Lawson was never a great run defender with this team. Bryce Huff was the guy who got to the quarterback as rated as high as any pass rusher in the NFL. Not known as a great run defender. I think the Jets are always fine with one of their 2 defensive ends, just being a pure pass rush guy, being more of a finesse guy. And look, you'd love to see McDonald develop more moves, and he can. Look, his arm length gives him an opportunity to develop a bigger repertoire, but I don't think you need a ton of pass rush moves to succeed in the NFL. It's more a question of, do your moves complement each other? And if you have a guy who can do a speed rush and, really, really pushing on the outside, that complements a spin move really well, because the speed rush, if you're explosive on the outside, you get the defensive lineman, the offensive tackle to maybe overset a little bit. The offensive tackle is really worried about getting beat to the outside, that maybe he goes too far outside, and that leaves him susceptible to the spin move going back inside. So that's a good combo to have. And if that's the type of thing McDonald can hone, maybe he can be a good player for this team. I think the other guy who might be called on to do more is Michael Clemens. And I wrote an article a few days back on GangreneNation.com about Clemens, about he's like the one guy who at least has the physical skill set to potentially fill the John Franklin Myers role, because with JFM on the team, the Jets were big on the defensive line. They had 3 guys on the defensive line who were 290 pounds. And that's not typical. Typically you have 2 guys like that who are defensive tackles. Adding that third guy means you had extra size on the defensive line. And that's important because the back 7 is small for the Jets. The Jets have an undersized back 7 of the guys who play linebacker, corner, and safety. CJ Mosley is the biggest. He only weighs 231 pounds. At least that's according to the team's roster. So when you're focused on speed, typically smaller guys are faster, and the Jets are focused on speed, so they play smaller guys. Well, that means they're susceptible to dealing with blocks. That means that they don't shed blocks as well because they don't have the strength to throw blockers off them. So how do you deal with that? Well, you have a bigger defensive line. You have guys who clog the lanes that the offensive linemen need to get to the second level. And JFM did that really well. Reddick's not that much bigger than Will McDonald. Jermaine's pretty big. Jermaine's really solid guy. He's a sturdy guy. He can hold the point of attack. But I don't know how much they want him to play that role. Last year, Jermaine played a lot in just the designated pass rusher role. Clemens is a guy who's big. He's not as big as JFM, but he's around the 270 range. He might be the guy who can keep the linebackers clean and kind of shut down the run lanes. Well, if Reddick's out for a longer time, the Jets are going to need to give Clemens more snaps. Clemens becomes the third defensive end, which is essentially a starting level spot. And look, last year Clemens was very up and down, committed some penalties he did not love. But we'll see. The Jets were a better run defense with him on the field last year. The Jets, if you look at the splits, the Jets run defense was actually very good with him on the field last year, and not nearly as good with him off the field. Can he add a few pass rushing moves? He didn't really give the Jets much as a pass rusher last year. Can he, in year 3, maybe he developed a little bit more as a pass rusher? Jets may need to find out, but these are the guys who are going to need to step up if Haason Reddick is not here. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so you never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody, and send in your mailbag questions. Tomorrow we'll do our Wednesday weekly mailbag. Talk to you then.